our semi-annual NCEP member update, where we provide for each of the member organizations for the National Council on Electricity Policy, provide an overview of the work that they've been doing, what they have coming up, what type of resources they have available, and any priorities that they want to share. So really looking forward to information-packed session for us today. So Jessica, we go to the next slide. Just so everyone is aware, we are recording this webinar and that it will be available on the NCEP website that you see listed there. And because we don't have, because we have the Zoom meeting set up, if you have any questions, please just type those in the Q&A box, and we will, the folks in the background will help address those and make sure that they get to the right speaker. If you do have something specific to a speaker, please add that to your question so we can make sure that we direct it properly. And if there are any questions that are asked throughout the session that for some reason we aren't able to get to, we will make sure that we capture those and follow up afterward with answers. And then before we officially kick off, most of you are here likely because you are part of our NCEP listserv and receive notices of our events and information. But in case you are not, or you know others who are not, there is a My NARUC option on the main NARUC website where you can sign up for an account and choose NCEP in the sign up process, and that will connect you to our listserv so you receive our information. Next slide, please. And I should have began by introducing myself. My name is Tanya Peslowski, and I am Director of Policy and Partnerships for NARUC, the Council, or I'm sorry, the Center for Partnerships and Innovation, and I'm also lead for the National Council on Electricity Policy work. So wonderful to see you all. I think this is the first time I'm leading an overall organization meeting. You see here, we have a fantastic lineup of speakers, again, from each of the NCEP member organizations. And I have seen the materials, and there will be a lot that I think will be of interest. Next slide, please. And you can go one more forward. This is just for those who are not aware, a quick introduction of who the National Council on Electricity Policy is. As noted there, we are excited to provide this unique forum that is funded by the Department of Energy, as you can see, to bring together state decision makers that are involved in electricity policy throughout the country to have conversations about upcoming, like emerging issues, and really have a forum to work together to understand how new issues are impacting their state, what the implications are for the larger grid, and just having a convening opportunity for each of the organizations that you see here. If you go to the next slide, please. Our executive committee is made up of representatives from each of the member organizations, as you can see. And we did have 2 new members join us this year, Mary Throne from the Wyoming Public Service Commission and Sarah Cottrell Probst from the Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department of New Mexico. And so we really have an engaged group of decision makers across the member organizations to provide leadership on the types of events that we hold and the direction of the organization. And they really are there to provide input on behalf of what each of, again, those member organizations are working on, and to make sure that each of the different entities are represented in the decision-making processes for NCEP. Next slide, please. Our upcoming events, as you can see, we have an overview for the DOE transmission needs study coming up. For those who aren't aware, this study existed previously in a different form. It used to be called the congestion study, and is the basis for the opportunity for federal siting authority to be utilized. And so it is critical for state decision makers to understand what goes into that study, as well as what the results are. The study itself has transitioned due to some of the infrastructure legislation earlier in the year. It's now called the needs study because it encompasses more inputs than just congestion. And we'll have DOE come in and share with us the results of the most recent study. So please mark your calendars, and we hope you're able to join us. We will have registration information coming out hopefully very early next week for that. So be on the lookout. And then the probably most exciting thing that we have going on coming up is the NCEP annual meeting. You see the dates. Oop, that 2 o'clock doesn't count there. Sorry, that was a carryover. It's we have about a day and a half on September 22nd and 23rd in Washington, D.C. We will be back to in-person and are covering this year. Our theme is the evolving customer, and are really focused on correlating the changes and transition in the grid with the role and the impacts on the customer. So plan to bring a series of topics to the attendees that share the customer perspective on a number of the, sort of critical topics of our time as the grid is evolving. And so making sure that we are keeping in mind the critical role of the customer and, again, the impacts on them. So please mark your calendars. That also soon we will be having the registration coming out to the listserv. So look forward to having you there. And next slide, please. Here are some of the resources specific to NCEP. The mini guide series is one that has emerged, as you can see, from about 2019. And these are under the different topics that are identified. And again, these are supported, or we work with the executive committee to come up with what things we think are prime for exploring further. And they are all done. The thread of the mini guide series is that it's interview based. So depending on what the topic is, we identify either, as you can see, public service commissions, as well as the other entities that are involved with energy officials and the state legislators, to bring in different perspectives and then provide an overview on that topic of those different perspectives. They've been really well received, and I urge you, if any of these topics are of interest to you, to please check those out on our website. And want to note that we also have a couple of those that are currently in development on transportation, electrification, and public utility commissions and the investment community. So those will probably be rolling out in the September timeframe. And then I just want to make sure everyone is aware, we have this transmission and distribution resources page on the NCEP website. Prior to this year, a lot of work for like the last 3 years has been focused on transmission and distribution intersection and issues related to all sorts of things, including integrated planning. And there are, as noted, over 200 resources available on this particular page related to a number of aspects of that work. So if that is something that is of interest to you, I urge you to please check it out. And I will add that we are always interested in updates to that resource. If any of you happen to have something that you think is particularly important in this topic that would be helpful to add to that webpage, please reach out to us, and we would love to make sure that it's as comprehensive as possible. Next page, please. And with that, I will turn it over to Danielle to talk about the NERUC updates.
Thank you, Tanya. Nice to be here with everyone. Next slide, please. My name is Danielle Sass-Burnett. I am the Senior Director for the NERUC Center for Partnerships and Innovation. You probably know, but NERUC is the National Association for Utility Commissioners across the country who regulate the provision of electricity, natural gas, telecommunications, and water utilities. Next slide. The Center for Partnerships and Innovation is the technical assistance team for commissioners and commission staff. We are fully grant funded and thank the U.S. Department of Energy and the National Institute for Standards and Technology for their support of our initiatives. Our team is focused on identifying emerging challenges and helping to connect state commissions with expertise and strategies to inform their decision-making. And we do this through publications, virtual and in-person events, and recorded and live trainings. You can find an updated 2-page fact sheet with all of our most current activities on our website at any time. It's on our homepage in the quick links in the upper right-hand corner. But I'm going to review some of those items today. Next slide. So the Center for Partnerships and Innovation team works across 5 key topical areas, essentially the entirety of the energy system, from energy generation to transmission, distribution, and customers, including behind the meter, and also critical infrastructure response and resilience, which includes cybersecurity. So there are so many topics and so many activities going on. We don't have time to go through all of them, but I did want to give you a sense of the breadth of the work that we're doing across the team these days in support of our members. And mention that the asterisk items on here are those where we have a working group, a partnership, or a committee that hosts regular events, learning opportunities, peer sharing opportunities. So if you are a NARUC member and would like to get involved, please definitely reach out and we'll get you on our member list and get you connected to those types of ongoing learning opportunities. Next slide. In 2022, we have published 2 documents that might be of interest and have many more that are in the final stages and will be released this fall. The 2 that were published, one was in partnership with our colleagues at NASIO on valuing resilience for microgrids that focused on challenges, innovative approaches, and state needs. And this was a recap, or actually an update, a summary of what kinds of resilience methodologies are being used right now among state decision makers. The second publication is State Approaches to Intervenor Compensation. Intervenor compensation is a program that some states have, about 6 states have, and 2 more are setting up to provide funding for consumer advocates, community groups to be able to participate in Public Utility Commission proceedings. And this document provides a comprehensive review of what's happening across all of the states, including a number of summary tables with additional information. So those are available on our website right now, which is naruc.org/CPI. And then, as I said, coming soon, we have quite a few resources. One around cybersecurity breach reporting requirements, a Black Sky Playbook that we just did a demo of in our at our summer policy summit in July, earlier this month, a resource around defense energy resilience and questions for commissions. We have a couple of electric vehicle issue briefs forthcoming, one on equity, one on interoperability, and we'll be producing some more over the winter time on vehicle to grid integration and on cybersecurity. We have some toolboxes that are issue briefs, essentially, about community solar for low and moderate income customers, and one on electrification and how different commissions and utilities are approaching these topics and ultimately how they're paying for those. We've got a paper being reviewed right now around low carbon fuels, and one in partnership with NASIO on renewable energy microgrids. And nuclear is a keystone clean energy resource. And finally, a collaboration between NASIO, National Governors Association, and NARUC on state approaches to energy justice. And you might hear more about that from my colleagues. Next slide. In addition to all of those forthcoming items, we host a number of member working groups, as I mentioned, and these slides will be posted so you can click on the underlined links about the working group resources and recorded webinars for microgrids, transportation electrification or electric vehicles, grid interactive efficient buildings, which is also talking a lot about demand flexibility these days and in partnership with NASIO, and performance-based regulation. So various webinars being held and resources posted along those topics. And as you can see on the left-hand side, we've also recently hosted a training series that is whose recorded presentations are available to anyone on electricity system planning, plus a number of webinars around nuclear energy and advanced nuclear, some webinars on resilience, and not too long ago, we translated many of our on-demand training webinars into Spanish, and so those are available through the links on this slide as well. Next slide. Lastly, I wanted to just give a quick preview of some upcoming events that you might be interested in joining us for. The first is virtual, our innovation webinar series, which hosts one webinar every month and is open to all stakeholders and interested parties. On August 25th, we will be covering energy storage in IRPs. In September, we'll talk about innovative wildfire mitigation technologies, and in October, we'll touch on long duration storage. We are hosting a regional cybersecurity training specifically for public utility regulators in our Western region in early September. And then later in September, alongside the NCEP annual meeting, that will be the following 2 days, there'll be a NARUC and NASIO joint DER interconnection workshop. And this is part of an initiative that we are hosting around DER integration and compensation, which is helping to prepare states for implementation of FERC Order 2222 and other transmission distribution coordination DER aggregation. So there will be a registration page for that very soon, and travel stipends will be available for NARUC and NASIO members for that, and for all NCEP members for the NCEP annual meeting. And finally, in September, we will be continuing a series on grid data sharing. We've assembled a collaborative group who are working to develop a grid data sharing framework that could be used by all states to help them decide what kind of utility grid data should be accessible to DER providers and others to support siting and interconnection. And I believe that's next slide, please. I think that's it, except for our contact information. There are about a dozen folks on the CPI team, and we would be more than happy to help you find the resources that you are most interested in and get you connected with various partnership and working group opportunities if you would like. And I think I will be turning it over to Kirsten Verklaas next.
Great, thank you so much, Danielle. And hi, everybody. It's great to see you all this Friday afternoon or Friday morning, wherever you may be. My name is Kirsten Verklaas. I'm the Managing Director for Electricity and Energy Security at NASIO, the National Association of State Energy Officials. Next slide, please. And if you don't know NASIO, we represent the governor-designated energy officials from each of the 56 states and territories. We serve as a resource to them, as well as represent their interest in DC vis-a-vis Congress and the federal agencies. Next slide, please. And we cover a whole bunch of issues that are related to the State Energy Office work. We have the electricity and energy security programs I oversee, but we also have programs on the building side, transportation, and financing. We also have cross-cutting issues such as equity, resilience, and workforce. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to touch on a few of the kind of program and activity spotlights. There's lots going on with our members and on the federal level, so just wanted to highlight a few. We continue to support our members and interested other state agencies on the implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or the bipartisan infrastructure law, and the main focus there has been on supporting our members in implementing or applying for the 4101D resilience funding, and also tracking some of the other 4101 resilience funds, as well as 4103. We also are working with our members to support some of the clean hydrogen hub developments, and work with our members on some of the transportation provisions, as well as some of the buildings provisions in the IIJ. That continues to be a focus for all program areas, and I will expect this to be continuing to be a focus of our members and us for the next few years. On the transmission side, We support our members in transmission planning and policy. We will have two guides coming up that we are developing, one outlining the State Energy Office role in transmission planning and permitting, which also will include a discussion of some of the regional and cross-regional considerations and transmission. We're also developing a program or a guide on innovative transmission technologies and planning solutions. And we're also working with our members to think about what some of the data needs are from the state side when we're thinking about macroeconomic benefits of some of these planned transmission projects. We're also supporting our members as they're engaging on the transmission planning study and the transmission needs study, which both Danielle and Tanya have referenced. On the transportation side, NASIO signed an MOU with AASHTO and the Joint Office of Energy and Transportation in February to enhance the state-federal coordination. And then just last week, we launched a new initiative with the Joint Office and AASHTO to support the goals of the MOU, which will be including convening the states on a regional basis to explore best practices as they're implementing some of the IIJA funding and NEVI funding. And in the next quarter, we will work with our partners to enhance the EV State Clearinghouse, which is the one-stop shop for states on transportation electrification. And we'll expect to update or release more information on that soon. In terms of energy security and emergency response, we obviously continue to support our members on any kind of response effort. So far, knock on wood, the hurricane season has been calm. But we also continue to support them in exercises. We have one upcoming exercise in Tennessee and had a regional exercise in Wisconsin earlier this summer. We're also, together with the National Governors Association, are developing an energy emergency crisis comms playbook, which will be released soon. And then we continue to support our members on energy security planning and plans, which have been enhanced to the IIJA as well. On the equity side, you already heard Danielle talk about some of that, but we, together with NGA and NERUC, had an equity roundtable in April, and we'll follow that up with papers later this year. For the Grid Interactive Efficient Buildings Working Group, in close collaboration with NERUC, we continue a series of working group forums and working on a couple of very short pieces kind of on a GAB 101 overview of cybersecurity and DERs, and continue to collaborate with national labs on their relevant tech assistance offerings. We're also launching an industrial manufacturing initiative with support of the Advanced Manufacturing Office, AMO, at DOE. And so just wanted to highlight that. If you're interested, let me know. I'll put you in touch with my colleague who's working on that. As the part of the State Microgrid Working Group, we are developing a framework state energy offices and public utility commissions to think of if they're thinking about standing up their own kind of microgrid programs. We had several of our members of the working group do so very successfully. And in preparation of that, we had a workshop with our members of the working group earlier this spring. We'll also continue to work with our Indian colleagues. We had a US-India subnational forum earlier this month, talking about electricity planning and DER integration both in the US and in India. And then Danielle also already mentioned our DER integration and compensation work. We have an advisory group that guides that project, which kicked off earlier this spring, and really excited to really get started in earnest in September with our workshop. But we did have a few of webinars already taking place this spring, mainly presenting on some of the reports on the implications of Work Order 2222 that have come out over the past few months. Next slide, please. In the past 6 months, we produced publications on workforce together with the Maryland Energy Administration. We have a Maryland 2021 Clean Energy Industry Report. Danielle already mentioned the microgrid paper, so I won't touch on that, but we also had a paper on financing, MUSH markets, building financing options for energy efficiency improvements. We had a paper on highlights and trends of comprehensive state energy plans, which is one of the core functions of the state energy offices. And then we also had a series of papers that delve into low and moderate income and solar programs across the states. We will have this or next month in August, a paper coming up on critical minerals, the crisis communications I already mentioned, as well as a paper on LMI community solar policy design. Next slide, please. In addition to many of the events that Danielle already mentioned, we also have a few upcoming webinars next month. I thought August was going to be not busy, but it turns out it's lots of things are going on. So these are also all clickable links, but if you also want to sign up, please go to the NASIO webpage, and the events page has this all listed. Just want to highlight that we are planning a site visit and workshop on CCUS in Alabama at the end of August. The annual meeting will be happening in October, and the NASIO Energy Security Planning Bootcamp will be in November. Exact dates to be determined. And then the other webinars listed, feel free to go to the events page and sign up for those. Next slide. If you have any questions about this kind of whirlwind tour of NASIO programs, please don't hesitate to get in touch with me or my colleague, Kelsey Jones. We are on the electricity side, but obviously big thanks and kudos to all of the staff at NASIO and all of our supporters, be it DOE or our foundation support on some of these projects. But if you have a specific question, I'm happy to connect you to any of my colleagues who you can see find out on our website, as well as the staff list who are working on all of these programs. This is not just me and Kelsey, but I'll be happy to route your inquiry to them. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll turn it over to Tanya or Dan.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Kirsten. And thank you also to Tanya, Danielle, and others at NARUC for hosting this meeting. This webinar. I think it's great to be back on the line with you all. And it's always impressive to see all of the work that this community is doing in support of the states. So if we can go to the next slide. So my name is Dan Law. For those who I haven't met, I'm the Energy Program Director here at the National Governors Association. Next slide. For those who aren't familiar with NGA, we're the bipartisan membership organization of the 55 state and territory governors. So we provide governors with state-based solutions on a wide range of areas. We have a few sides of the shop. The primary sides being our Office of Federal Relations, and then where we advocate on behalf of the governors on the federal side and with Congress, and then where my team and I sit, which is in our Center for Best Practice. Next slide, please. So our Center for Best Practices is really our state policy and technical assistance shop for the governors. We provide them with policy solutions and ideas and forums for convening on a wide range of topics, sometimes working directly with the governors and often working with the governor's policy staff who address a wide range of areas. So I lead our energy program, which is largely supported by DOE, and we appreciate that support. Also on my team, some of whom are on the line today, is Jessica Rackley, who's another program director at NGA. She is on maternity leave at the moment, returning shortly. And then on our teams are Kara Doherty and Alex Sue, again, both of whom may be on or you may be interacting with in different areas. But in addition, importantly, in addition to our work on energy policy, NGA addresses really a wide range of program areas. So I have colleagues who lead all of the program areas that you see on the right part of this slide, everything from cybersecurity and homeland security to healthcare delivery, K through 12 and post-secondary education, workforce and economic development, and more. And I bring that up because we're increasingly working collaboratively across those areas as we see the need. So for example, on issues related to energy and workforce, cybersecurity, homeland security, and the energy sector, and more. So it's something that I anticipate is going to continue and continue in a robust way as we seek to really bring folks together from across the states to address some of the pressing issues that they're facing. To go to the next slide, one other item I just wanted to highlight, which I'm sure is no surprise to anybody on the line today, is that this is a big election year for the governors. So at the end of the year, we're going to be looking at 39 gubernatorial elections. It's 36 state and 3 territory. 7 governors are either term limited or not seeking re-election. So it remains to be seen how many will turn over, but either way, any way that we cut it, we're anticipating a sizable new class of governors next year. And as a result, much of the work that we're going to be doing through the rest of this year is going to be in preparation for that. And then next year, we're going to be doing quite a bit to bring those governors and their staff, once they're named, really up to speed on just a wide range of topics, everything from our seminar for new governors, which takes place, I believe it's the week before Thanksgiving this year. And that's really an onboarding session for the newly elected governors specifically to help them identify, really what they'll need to do as they take office. But then early into next year, we'll get into more topical meetings like boot camp for new energy policy advisors and trainings on more specific topics. So jumping ahead to the next slide, I'm going to walk through just a couple of recent resources that we have, and then I'll talk a bit more about our priorities for the rest of this year and into early next year. This is one of our newer reports from several months ago. It's a deep dive into the roles that states and governors in particular can play in addressing foreign threats to critical energy infrastructure in the US. Address a wide range of potential solutions and roles here, everything from strengthening information sharing frameworks and bidirectional communications with partners like the energy sector and the federal government, identifying and prioritizing essential assets and systems for security improvements, to performing supply chain risk management and assessments, and aligning state procurement with national security standards. Going to the next slide. This isn't a new, I believe I presented this one last time, but I wanted to repeat it here because I think it remains very evergreen, especially as we're moving to hurricane season and wildfire season. And of course, we're continually seeing just a range of threats to the energy sector across the country. So this is an in-depth guiding document for governors and senior state staff on the actions that governors can and the executive branch can take to respond to energy emergencies and facilitate recovery and restoration. Next slide. As my colleagues have all mentioned, and I suspect you'll continue to hear throughout this webinar, much of our work over the past year has really shifted in support of our members' implementation of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. I'm really pleased to be able to share this resource page with you because I can take very little credit for it. I have colleagues on my team and our infrastructure team who are very closely tracking all aspects of the bill, energy and others, so that we can compile all the various funding opportunity announcements, requests for information, and other resources from our partner organizations and our organization in one place to help governors in the states navigate this topic, and encourage others to visit this. And standing offer to all of my state association colleagues on the call is that as you develop resources that would be helpful to your members of the states broadly, we're very happy to take those and link to them here as well, so that we can amplify the work that you're doing. In addition to this resource page, we've been working closely through our infrastructure team with governors' infrastructure coordinators. I believe most of the governors, if not all, have named somebody as an infrastructure coordinator. They're working across the states to really support state agencies, local governments, and drive planning, cross-cutting planning and dialogue within their states around IJ implementation and the funding applications that states are going to be providing. With them and with our policy advisors, we've been hosting topical summits on things like broadband and workforce, energy resilience. I'll talk a little bit more about that, but we held that one actually just this week. And we'll be hosting one on electric vehicles this fall. we've also been hosting monthly calls with the White House and regular calls with other federal agencies like DOE, EPA, DOT, NTIA, and more. So going to the next slide, flag here, and I have a link to our energy page, but we're also doing some just smaller policy pieces and issue summaries throughout the year that would be, I think, pertinent to this group and certainly relevant to our members. So moving to our focus areas for the coming 6 months and year, if we can jump 2 slides ahead. Thank you. So in the areas of clean energy and grid modernization, I mentioned that in this fall, we will have a summit that we'll be hosting on electric and alternative fuel vehicles. And we're doing that in partnership with Governor McMaster and his team in South Carolina. So we should have the announcement out for that meeting out shortly. We're also working on a few other topics related to grid modernization and new technology deployment, including Governor's Guide on transmission siting and permitting, an issue brief on equitable deployment of distributed energy resources. That's part of that suite of work on energy justice that both Danielle and Kirsten mentioned. We've been partnering closely with NASU and NARUC on the project, and also an issue brief and some trainings either later this year or early next on grid modernization and resilience to help new governors navigate the topic. We have a suite of work on nuclear energy generation that includes both a new governor's guide in development on nuclear energy policies and regulations that's geared towards new governors taking office next year, and also policy brief in development on integrated energy systems and the role of nuclear hydrogen production and more. And then in support for energy producing states and fossil communities, we are working with our members to support them on state hydrogen hubs and working with our workforce and post-secondary education teams on an upcoming project on the roles that governors and states can play to support workforce planning and economic development for fossil fuel communities. Next slide. A couple of things that I'll flag here, some of which have already been discussed. We're going to be doing a bit of work on energy security for vulnerable and at-risk communities and assets. And that's going to be coming out later this year. We held our cybersecurity summit, which is a broader cybersecurity meeting that we hold for all the states and territories. We held it this past June, and we're able to actually bake in an energy track there. And we're going to continue quite a bit of work on the cyber side. Of note is the crisis communications playbook, based on a roundtable that we held with NASIO earlier this year. This is the one that Kirsten mentioned, and we're continuing to work closely with NASIO to finalize that document. It should be out, fingers crossed, this September. I also wanted to flag our work to support states in their participation in GridX. For the last several iterations of the exercise, we worked closely with NERC and the Electricity ISAC to support states as they register and participate in that exercise. But starting in this latest iteration, so for GridX 6, which took place this past November, we also worked very closely with NARUC and with the EISAC to carve out a more direct role for the states in the exercise. And we've already begun speaking with the EISAC for GridX 7, even though that's not until November of next year, so that we can work with our states to help them get registered early and participate alongside their utility partners, since I know some of that planning at the utility level and even at the state level has already begun. And then I had mentioned also that we hosted this past week a state learning lab on energy and critical infrastructure resilience. Thanks to those of you who attended that, we had about 25 states and participation from federal agencies funding those programs through the IIJA, including DOE, EPA, NOAA, the FCC, and FEMA, importantly, how can I forget them? So it was really great to have everybody down there to talk about the work that governors and and governors, energy officials, and energy policy advisors and state chief resilience officers can do to really support the resilience of energy and critical infrastructure systems. Going to the next slide, I'll just briefly mention that we do have an ability to provide on-demand technical assistance. My contact information is below, so you're welcome to connect with me or any of my colleagues with requests, and we're always available to support the states. We're also looking forward to participating next week in the Legislative Energy Horizons Institute, which I'm sure Aaron is going to talk more about. This is the second year that we've been partnering with NCSL to bring executive staff to those meetings. So we'll have 5 of our state members in attendance in Richland, Washington for that session. So I will pause there and can either take questions, or if we're holding questions to the end, I think this is my last slide. I will transition it over to my contact information. It's here to either Tanya or let's see who comes next. NCSL. So Aaron, you are up. Thanks all.
Thank you, Dan, and thanks everybody for having NCSL as part of this conversation. We always appreciate working with our end group partners and working with all of you. So please reach out to me if you have any questions about anything I'm about to present, or if there's anything NCSL can do to help. Next slide, please. The National Conference of State Legislatures is the membership organization for the state legislatures around the country. We provide technical assistance to legislators and legislative staff, and we represent state legislatures' interests to Congress and the administration. Next slide, please. Our energy program includes staff here in Denver, Colorado at NCSL's headquarters, as well as in Washington, D.C. We provide technical assistance to state legislators and legislative staff. We produce a variety of publications, webinars, bill tracking and analysis, and I'll talk about a number of those things in just a minute. We also coordinate a number of standing task forces and working groups made up of state legislators and legislative staff who are focused on state energy policy. As my colleagues have talked about, our priorities are focused on supporting state policy development on energy production and use, energy security and resilience, nuclear energy policy, energy justice, and a variety of other topics. We're supported, in addition, from the support we get from our member legislatures, we're supported by cooperative agreements with a number of DOE offices, and we look forward to continuing that cooperation. And we're increasing our focus, as are most of the groups, on IIJA implementation. In particular, we've been doing work on electric vehicles, grid and transmission issues, school bus electrification, oil, gas, and coal reclamation, and nuclear energy policy, among others. And we expect continued focus on IIJA work over the next few years. Next slide, please. So I want to talk first about some of our recent events and upcoming events. We've got a lot happening in the next couple of weeks. In fact, we support a group called the Task Force on Energy Supply. We meet with that group a few times a year. It's made up of legislators and legislative staff who are focused on energy policy in their states. We had a session of that task force in Seattle in May that included discussion of disaster mitigation, emissions market mechanisms, grid modernization, hydrogen, utility regulation. It was a great session, and the slides and materials from that event are on our website. You can reach them through the links on this page. We're actually meeting starting tomorrow in Denver with the task force again. So tomorrow and Sunday, we'll do a day of tours of energy infrastructure in the Denver area, and we'll have sessions on energy infrastructure decommissioning and recycling, transmission planning, and building electrification. So we're excited about that meeting this week. I'll also note that Sunday afternoon, we're hosting our Energy Policy Summit, which will have sessions on electricity markets, energy justice, and the energy transition. That meeting is open to any interested folks. So if you're in Denver this weekend and want to stop by, let me know. There's still room. Our task force is also going to meet likely in San Diego in December, although that is still tentative. So we're in the process of planning that meeting. We also organize a group called the Nuclear Legislative Working Group, which is state legislators and staff focused on nuclear policy. We met in June in Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and we'll meet again in November in New Orleans. So we're really excited about that group, and there's a lot happening in states around nuclear policy, as you're aware. And as Dan mentioned, we're hosting the Legislative Energy Horizon Institute in August in Richland, Washington, and then in November in Washington, D.C. We've got a great group of state legislators as well as governor's office staff attending Lehigh this year. And we're happy to have governor's office staff be part of that group and happy to have NGA's support. We really think it's valuable to get legislators together with their colleagues in executive offices to sort of build knowledge together and build those connections. So that's a really great partnership. And then the last thing I'll mention, which isn't here, is next week, August 1st to 3rd, NCSL's annual legislative summit is happening in Denver. That's a meeting of 5,000 state legislators and staff getting together. We have a number of energy activities happening next week as part of our legislative summit, including a session on IIJA implementation, a session on school bus electrification, and a session on advanced energy technology. So hopefully see some of you in Denver next week. And if you are around, we're happy to have you join us. Next slide, please. So we've got a number of recent publications that might be of interest to this group, and I've included links to them here. We put together a primer on electricity markets for state legislators. Includes the basics of electricity markets, the interaction between state policy and markets, and we'll have a session on electricity markets at our Energy Policy Summit on Sunday. So that's an active area of work. We produce an annual legislative energy trends report. So I have a link here to the most recent one of those reports. That report focuses on state legislative action on energy-related legislation in the 2021 legislative sessions. It includes sections on climate policy, nuclear policy, fossil fuel-related measures, energy security, and others. Our 2022 report, which will review everything that's happened in the 2022 legislative sessions, should be out at the end of this calendar year. We also have been doing work on energy justice, as a number of the groups have, and we've got a recent publication on how state legislatures have been considering energy justice, including policies around infrastructure siting and access to community solar. We'll have a session on energy justice at our Energy Policy Summit on Sunday. Finally, we have a recent publication on the use of FEMA hazard mitigation grant program and BRIC funds for energy resilience that includes some considerations for state legislatures and how they can position their states to access those funds. We're working on a new publication on a similar focus, but for tribes. So how tribal governments can position themselves for the use of FEMA funds for energy resistance. So that's a forthcoming publication that will be available soon. A couple of other things we're working on this fall that should be out this calendar year are an electric system planning publication series. There'll be one installment of that on integrated distribution and a second on transmission. We also have a multi-installment series on energy security and state legislative action related to energy security. So look for those things coming soon. Next slide, please. Finally, we have a number of recent webinars that are available on our website, and there are links to them here. I'll just highlight a couple of the things that I think are most relevant to this group. In April, we had a webinar on microgrids and state policies related to those. We appreciated Nasio's participation in that webinar, which went really well. We also had webinars on hardening infrastructure and state requirements and incentives for electric infrastructure hardening, and the state role in ensuring utilities are appropriately identifying and mitigating risks to the electricity system from extreme weather. That was presented in May, and the recordings here. We have some upcoming webinars and podcasts. We'll have a podcast with DOE leadership in September on extreme weather and its implications for the energy system. We'll have a podcast in October around implementation of the energy-related provisions of the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. And we've got webinars planned on resilient electricity and integrated distribution planning. So lots of multimedia stuff coming your way from NCSL in the next few months. Next slide, please. So I will stop there. There's a link here to all of our energy resources. And if you have any questions or if there's anything NCSL can do to support your work, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. And that's all that I have.
Friends, it's me. Thanks for spending time with us today. My name is Miles Keogh. I'm the guy in the corner office at the National Association of Clean Air Agencies, which is the end group that brings together the state and local agencies that implement the Clean Air Act. There's 157 state and local agencies in our fine association spread across every region of this country. And our purpose and objective is to improve the effectiveness and capability of the state and local agencies and to advance the equitable protection of clean air for all. I don't have slides this time through. Mostly, I just want to spend a few moments really appreciating the other folks on this call, especially the organizers, the National Council and the like. This is a convening that I always learn a lot from, and today's no exception. NACA convenes and supplies best practices and policy conversations for our agencies, and we're our members' voice here in Washington, D.C. with EPA through comments on regulatory actions that EPA intends to take, with the administration and with Capitol Hill in particular in the domain of appropriations, but there's been plenty going on in Capitol Hill. And in addition to the sort of the national ambient air quality standards and monitoring and the traditional things that I know y'all already know plenty about, our last 6 months and next 6 months look like they'll be populated a lot with things like mobile sources, truck rules, methane rules, et cetera, and things like ethylene oxide in the air toxics domain that looks like it's going to really be a very exciting policy conversation. But that's not so germane to the electricity sector. One of the things that NACA does is try to, in a quick way, convene the expertise of our members, but also supply our own expertise to quickly digest and make meaningful some of the things that are happening in the electric power area for clean air agencies, basically trying to translate between what y'all do in the power sector and what they do in the clean air sector, and make the NACS speaking population be able to speak fluently and converse with folks who are in the sort of the IRP and cost allocation and legislation and energy space as well. There's been a lot going on lately in the climate space that we've been doing kind of analytics on. What does this mean? A big one was the Supreme Court decision in the West Virginia case, trying to digest what that means in terms of what constraints are placed on EPA, but also what constraints are placed on other areas of interface between states and local agencies and federal action overall, particularly as they relate to climate change. I know that the groups on this call have had their hand in this as well, but there was a deal that was just brokered on the Democrat side of Capitol Hill in the Senate that makes it look like there will be some components of climate change legislation that are at least being moved forward for consideration. Right now, the number's about $369 billion. Included in that is about $5 billion that I don't even want to it's one of those things I don't even want to jinx it, because there's some really great programs related to greenhouse gas programs, reduction programs, planning programs, technical assistance programs, et cetera. And there's billions of dollars for things like electric transmission siting, EV adoption, energy efficiency. Before you even get to about page 700, NASIO gets mentioned up and down in that thing. So that's been really, really useful and interesting to try and we've been mining that today and producing analytics for our members, written memoranda, analyzing what's in there. Finally, EPA, as y'all probably all know, has a power sector strategy. We've been engaging very heavily with them about what that will include and what that will look like. It includes components like follow-up from the cross-state rules, follow-ups from whatever replaces the Affordable Clean Energy and Clean Power Plan rules, addressing GHG emissions from power plants. It'll include things like coal combustion residuals and all kinds of stuff on particulates and changes to the NACs and the like. So we've been pretty closely involved in that. My sense is that there's probably going to be a future moment at which all of our groups will be convened to have some conversation internally about what are in our shared interests that we want to see move forward. With that, we've been also doing plenty of sort of educational work to bring forward information about what's going on in the CCS domain, the carbon capture and storage domain, that's CCS, or in direct air capture of greenhouse gases. Those are areas that the Department of Energy has a lot of information about. They're not always germane to the writing of permits or to the issuance of enforcement actions or to the implementation of monitoring networks and the like. So we're doing plenty of conversation about that. NACA has been producing a ton of technical resources for our members on environmental justice. I've heard energy justice come up a bunch today. I'm really interested in digging into some of the resources that were mentioned by NASIO and NARUC and NGA, where I think there's probably some good scope for coordination there. And then finally, like everybody else, we're digging in on workforce issues, and I leverage pretty heavily some of the NGA and NCSL resources on workforce as our members try and figure out mentoring, the development of peer leadership exchange programs, developing university consortia to create a recruiting pipeline, dealing with burnout, dealing with retention, succession, et cetera. So we're developing a bunch of short resources on those for our members, and I've been really appreciative of what's been made by the other N groups in this space because we've really not had to reinvent the wheel a bunch on that. With that, I think I'll pass the mic to our next speaker.
Good to see you, Miles. Good to see everyone. Thank you for the time to update on what's been going on at Nasuka, National Association of State Utility Consumer Advocates. I'm filling in for our executive director, Dave Springy. He is getting some well-deserved time off, and just glad to be with you today and updating on what's going on with Nasuka. And for some reason, I'm not seeing the slides, but oh, there we are. Good enough. So I wanted to let everybody know about some initiatives that we've been involved in. And if you have any background with consumer advocates, you'll know that we are a group that is typically undersourced and overtasked. So we take advantage of the excellent opportunities to work with our national labs on resources that are of need to our sector, and I just would highly recommend taking a look at these resources. I do find that the presentations we develop and receive from these organizations tend to be focused on, really convincing the skeptics in the crowd. So if you're looking for convincing and compelling reasons for a particular policy or approach in the sphere of utility regulation, I think looking at our resources is a good place to start. We partnered with Lawrence Berkeley National Lab on a series on innovation in the electric sector, really just looking at how much everything is changing and the shifting risks that customers are under and what type of things we need to be thinking about in terms of evolving regulatory policies. I also wanted to recommend for your review Nasuka's transmission and distribution planning resolution. It's really the first major transmission resolution that we've issued since about 2010. So it covers a lot of ground. It offers some common sense principles on everything ranging from transmission planning, cost allocation, benefits of competition, the role for independent transmission monitor, the importance of grid enhancing technologies, and taking a narrow and tailored approach to awarding transmission incentives. And we are also offering regulatory basics courses. So if you have new people, new staff members who are curious about how rate making occurs and cost of service accounting, return on equity, things of that nature, we have a library of introductory courses for staff members who may benefit from that. Next slide, please. As I mentioned, we take the opportunity to participate with our national labs whenever possible. I would flag for your review the series that we received at our summer meeting in Indianapolis, supported by Department of Energy and Lawrence Berkeley Labs. If you want, I think the grid modernization plans is just a great place to start to understand why it's important to spend time looking at grid modernization and the need for integrated type planning that coordinates both your distribution and your resource planning. And these, I think all of these resources noted here kind of are developed around that theme. So if it kind of highlights the importance of why we need to do planning and engage stakeholders in that. So I recommend that. Next slide, please. And then we will be meeting in November, our annual meeting, and we often team up with NARUC on that. So we're looking forward to seeing many of you there and getting an update on what's going on in your worlds. We did have a water conference last month. Just really excellent presentation. I heard a lot of really positive remarks on the value of the takeaways and learning that was available in that conference. And all of these materials are available on Nasuka's website for your review. Next slide, please. Thank you. With that, I'll turn it over to our moderator host.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, and thanks to all of our speakers. I know we are just a bit over time. Appreciate all of you who have been able to stick around to the end. As we noted at the beginning, since we will be sharing the presentation that has the contact information for all of our speakers. So if there's anyone you need to follow up on based on the conversation you heard today or just any other questions, please use that as a resource. And certainly if there's anything that we can help you with at NCEP, you have my contact information there as well. Please reach out. And we, just as a wrap up, thank you again to the speakers. And we also need to thank the Department of Energy for their support for this work. So with that, a reminder about the annual meeting and look forward to seeing all of you at future NCEP events. Thanks for your time, everyone.